It's time for Dads Making a Difference, powered by First Things First. This transformative show will help you learn how to handle the stress of fatherhood, how to better relate to your child, navigate the child support system, and all things that come with being a dad. With your hosts, Reggie Madison and James Frankie Woods.
A report released by the National Fathering Institute stated that though males make up 49% of the U.S. population, they account for 80% of the suicides. Let that sink in. Women are two times more likely than men to be diagnosed with depression, but yet men are 3 times more likely to take their own lives. Let's not even mention the fact that nearly all mass shootings in the U.S. are carried out by males. This show has always been about changing the narrative. And one of the narratives that has to change is the one that says men either don't have mental health challenges or that real men don't need to get help dealing with those challenges. Well, today we have brought in someone who has been walking alongside men for years now as a counselor. He's getting down and dirty in the muck with men and helping them overcome many of these issues. He's the founder of Roots Counseling Center in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Welcome to the show, Jeff Eckert. How are you?
Reggie, thanks for having me. I do indeed love working with men. God called me to that probably 30 years ago, and it's still something I love doing every day. I love sitting with men and walking with them in and out of all kinds of stories, and just letting them know the story is not over no matter what has happened in your life.
Oh, that's good. So before we get into all that, tell us a little bit about you. Who are you? What's your family makeup? What do you do? That kind of thing.
Yeah, I run a counseling center with my wife in Red Bank. It's called Roots Counseling Center. We've got 20 therapists there and in East Brainerd. Our focus is on really caring for our clients. We hire therapists who love people and who love to work with people. That's the prerequisite for our therapists, is people who really enjoy sitting with people and caring for them in their pain. I've started that with my wife in 2017, and it's grown, and we've been blessed in so many ways in the context of that. We have 4 kids, from 18 down to 10. I've got kids in every level of school. I've got elementary, middle, high school, and college now. So life is full, but you know all about that.
Yeah. 4, 7. Look, I'm nearing that space where I have someone in all. I got a high school graduate this year, so don't even want to think about it right now. I might need to come see you. So we like to ask every guest this. Tell us your daddy story. So we say, when we ask about your dad, just what was that experience like for you?
So my dad was a Baptist pastor. He was Christian ed and music pastor. The best way I think people would describe him, and he's still living at this point, he's 79 years old. He is the spitting image of Fred Rogers from Mr. Rogers. He's kind, he's caring, he's compassionate, and people just love being around him. He's a good man. He has a lot of integrity. He loves people. I think one of the things I may have missed growing up in my family, though, was with him being a pastor and his wiring. I didn't feel very pursued a lot in my family. He's sort of a passive person. He sits back and kind of lets life go by. And that passivity sometimes was painful and hurtful. So despite the fact that he taught me how to love people and treat people and how to love a wife and many of those things, he didn't always teach me how to be bold and take risks and be assertive. And I've had to learn that other ways because I just didn't get that on the home front.
You say that, and that's one of those conversations me and my wife have quite often. And we appreciate very much, to your point, all the things that our parents have given us, but then we also recognize some of those gaps, right? And want to make sure that we don't, project that onto someone else, right?
Sure.
So that others aren't, I'll say, hurt from our hurts or lack. How have you dealt with that so that you don't counsel out of a lack?
So I probably should tell a quick story to explain kind of how I went from being very passive to much more bold, risk-taking, assertive, speaking truth to people. I was in college and I took a class called interpersonal communication, and one of our assignments in that class was to be tied with a 3-foot length of rope to another person for 17 hours. The only time you could take that rope off was to go to the bathroom. So a guy in the class who was kind of big man on campus, athlete, cool guy, came and asked me if I would be his partner, and I was so impressed and enamored. I was kind of nerdy guy on the fringes. I was like, wow, Joel asked me to be his partner. So we spent the day together, and at the end of that day, we had to write a paper for the class on what the experience was like. And I had a lot of things I wanted to do in that day with him, but I just deferred to him all day. He wanted to watch football, wanted to do this and that, and I just kind of went along with it, and I wrote my paper about that. Got my paper back, and I had a C on it, and I was a pretty good student, so I was not happy with that, but the feedback is what was life-changing. My professor said, you didn't complete this assignment. This isn't about your writing. You were passive, you didn't have a voice, you didn't speak up, you didn't communicate. And if you don't do something different with this in your life, you're going to have life pass you by and miss out on a lot of things. And that feedback on that paper shifted the course of how I related to people, because something in it penetrated my heart, and I said, this is not who I want to be.
Wow. So I'm really curious now as how that has informed how you care for people in your practice.
Yeah, so I'm known probably both by staff and my clients as a very straight shooter.
Yeah.
I'm compassionate, I'm caring, but I will not hesitate. I will not pull punches. I had a guy yesterday who said he didn't want to keep coming and seeing me because he didn't feel good when he left my office. And my response to that is, if I'm doing my job, a lot of times you're not going to feel good leaving my office, because I got to say hard things. I got to say things that you don't want to hear in the context of love, in the context of care, but things that are going to make you uncomfortable, to sort of shift the way you're doing things. If it's always warm and pleasant and fuzzy, we don't get where we need to go in sort of making the transformational change as men that we need to make coming out of our broken stories.
Ooh, there's a lot of stuff I wanted to ask about that. So it sounds like the tough, it's kind of, we call it tough love essentially, right?
Sure.
How do you deliver that? Like, is that, how do you care for someone knowing that you have to be the straight shooter and know that it might just flat out hurt their feelings?
So I'd share that in the first session with every client, kind of how I'm wired. I say, look, I'm from Chicago. I lived in a pretty direct family and a very direct culture, and I believe directness is the way to truth. If you're coming here and spending time and money and energy, I'm going to give you everything I've got, and that means not soft soaping, not candy coating, so you're going to get the truth as I see it. It's not always going to feel good, but I promise it's done out of care and love and a desire to see you be more healthy and whole. And I think people hear that, and sometimes I can see them a little anxious, but a lot of people say, wow, that's refreshing. I welcome that, and I need that in my life.
It's the need for consistency is probably, as dads, I've just realized that my kids can take a lot if I'm consistent. I can be direct. It can hurt their feelings. It can pierce them, but as long as I'm consistent, then they grow, I think, to appreciate it, to actually invite it.
Sure.
And you realize sometimes they start coming to you for it.
Right.
Because they know that's what they're going to get. Shifting a little bit, mental health, like it has been something that I think until the last maybe 10, 20 years was almost not even discussed.
Right.
What have you seen?
So I started practicing in '95, and what I saw then and what I see now is very different when it comes to how men approach counseling. At that point, most men were there because a wife was saying either you go to counseling or our marriage is over, or adolescent boys I worked with being sort of coerced to come. That was probably at least half of the male clients I saw. There was just not a voice or a grid for that among men. It was like, this is not what I do. I do things on my own. I don't need help. I've seen a big shift, especially probably in the last 5 to 10 years, in men coming voluntarily, men coming and saying, oh no, I'm not resistant to being here. I want to be here. I need this place. So I think part of that is, I think mental health is, there's a lot of things that have gone on in the world that have been pro mental health, and go talk and go get health. You see athletes coming out saying, hey, I need to take a step away from my sport to get healthy. And I think those kind of models that people look up to have created environments where men are more likely to come because they want help and they want to heal, as opposed to, well, I got to do this or else my mom is going to take my car away or my wife is going to separate from me, which has historically been a lot of the motivation.
Yeah. So what are some of the mental health challenges that you come in contact with the most?
Yeah. Coming out of COVID, which really has had a really devastating impact on mental health for people, I could talk for a long time about that. The level of despair in people that I see, you were mentioning those stats on suicidal men, I see more people that are ready to be done with life than I've ever seen. More people that I'm having to have a contract for making sure they don't harm themselves. And if they're feeling like it, they reach out to me and they commit to that and they contract to that. I'm seeing that in huge numbers. Marriages are a mess. I do some marital work, but right now I'm doing more than I've ever done because couples are coming in droves. And I think there's a lot of factors involved in that, but I think the way the world was during COVID, people behind closed doors, often in already broken situations, and they're put in this pressure cooker for most of 2 years. They did not come out unscathed, and now they're coming out saying, we are reeling, we don't know what to do, and we need help.
Man. And so people are coming and needing help. When you think about marriages, because we do First Things First, there's a lot of marital coaching as well. And guys are more engaged now. Like it's really a blessing to see guys being willing. Some even calling us saying, I need help. But that communication piece still just seems to be one of the top things.
Sure.
But I'm realizing more and more that it's because of often whether it's trauma or baggage or just different things that they're picking up and bringing into the situation. What are you seeing about with that?
Yeah, so trauma is definitely the buzzword in the counseling field right now, and I don't say that in a patronizing way in any way. It is what is being dealt with, and people are seeing and realizing and addressing trauma in a different way, and realizing, to your point, that the fallout of trauma early in their lives, it makes it hard to be a good husband, be a good communicator, be a good father, and it's not all just because I'm a jerk or I'm completely without skills and competency as a father. It's I have a lot of pain I'm bringing in that's blocking me from being able to do the things that are healthy, and I need somebody to help walk me through this. And a lot of times, talking about the trauma, until we work through that trauma and bring some distance from the trauma, because a lot of times the trauma is just all over them. It's in their face, they're seeing it, they're feeling it, and when it comes up, it's almost like they're still in it. Taking that from right here all over them and taking it out further away from them to a more distant spot where they still see it and it's still there, but they have some distance, and that distance allows them to see things more clearly in their marriage and their family and be able to be more honest and vulnerable, because that trauma is not exerting physiological and emotional and spiritual damage on them ongoing.
Why is it a man can experience, two men can experience the same situation, right? And you can name some potential traumatic experiences, right?
Sure.
And one walk away and essentially have PTSD from it, right?
Right.
While the other seems to be able to recover fine. Why is that?
Right. A couple thoughts on that. One, I think, is the wiring of the person. Some people are just more sensitive and more impacted by things in a deeper, more lasting way. Some people are wired a little differently as far as constitution and an ability to sort of move on. But some people that goes in and that sits there and that penetrates. So that's part of the maybe wiring nature part. The nurture part is some of the people that are able to walk away better had healthier environments they were in. So they had support, they had family, they had resources versus the person who, I never had anybody I could talk to. I never had any grid for dealing with this. And now it's 20 years later and it just feels like the pile has gotten higher. So I think that combination. And I would argue the guys that can walk away and shake it off, a lot of times it's probably getting swept under a rug somewhere and it's going to pop back out again, because I don't think a lot of trauma is stuff that just sort of time heals the wound. I don't believe in the phrase time heals all wounds. It does some part of that, but a lot of times time makes those wounds fester and get infected and be even worse than they were.
Yeah, I'm kind of on that camp in my own amateur mind where so much of it depends on that, what you said, the environment.
Yeah.
And I think about when my dad passed and the amount of family that we have come together. And one thing I remember specifically was at the time, my two oldest kids, we went to my cousin's house, and he had two kids that were around the same age. And just watching them kind of talk to each other and kind of process this thing out together takes what can be a traumatic experience and keeps it from having a traumatic effect.
Sure.
And not a lot of people give it. It's not a lot of people have that.
Right.
And so for guys, I know lots of times men can feel less than. They can feel whether it's guilt, whether it's shame, whether it's incompetent. How do you help? How do you meet guys there?
Right.
And then help move them out of that to get the help they need?
Yeah. I have a lot of guys who I ask for strengths and weaknesses when they start counseling, and they can come up with a long list of weaknesses and flaws and deficits, and the strengths column is empty. So one of my goals with guys is we keep pushing until we can build that strengths column and see this is what's really true. Because if you're seeing all weaknesses and no strengths, you're believing lies. Because the truth is everybody has strengths. We are all image bearers of God, and thus as image bearers we have good things about us that he infused in us. And so I'll have guys, we start working on that list and they come up with one thing, and I say, okay, at the beginning of every day you're going to write that in your journal and you're going to reflect on that until you start believing that more. And so sort of almost this behavioral cognitive, hey, this is true. This is what you need to think about, because all you're thinking about is this column over here. All you're thinking about is all the ways I've failed, all the ways I haven't measured up, all the ways the bar has been here and I've been 6 feet under it, as opposed to you are a good father who loves your kids well, not perfectly, but well. And let's reflect on that, hear that, let that penetrate. And if it's not penetrating, we're going to do a lot of things until it does.
Yeah. How does a man recognize when he needs help, when he needs to deal with some stuff?
That's a tough one, because I don't think men do realize that well. I think a lot of times by the time they're coming to me, they needed help 2 years ago. They've hit a point where I'm literally at the end of my rope and I don't know where else to turn, so finally I'm ending up here. So that's where it often ends. I think when you feel like, I've got friends, I may have a pastor, I may have someone in my life, I've gone to them, I've sought support and help, and it just feels like somehow I'm still just struggling to get by. I'm still struggling to get through. I've got this thing that just I can't get my head around. I mean, that would be the point where I would say, that starts to impact marriages and parenting, and you're like, I'm not as good a father and as a husband as I could be because I can't get past this thing. That's the point to say, hey, this is expensive and it takes time and it's scary and it's hard, but wow, the fruits it could bear if I go in and really engage, are worth the time, the money, and the effort in seeking something that might be different, something where I can sort of flip that script on my story and be something different.
Yeah. I've noticed different triggers, and you can tell me if there's other triggers. When men lose jobs and
Sure.
have a difficult time getting a job, I've
Right.
seen that be a trigger that can send men into a really depressive state.
Yep.
And so, what are some other things that you've seen that really just kind of trigger?
I think loss in general, jobs, marriages, family members, because I think men don't know how to grieve. So a lot of counseling in those situations is grieving a lost job, grieving a lost marriage, grieving a relationship with a father that was there but wasn't there. I'm not grieving that I didn't have a father. I'm grieving that I had a father who didn't provide the basic needs I needed. So a lot of guys, when they've lost their dads, they're not just coming in to grieve that death, they're grieving, man, I needed these things and I never had them, and I'm hurting so much because I didn't have a dad that taught me how to communicate or how to love or how to be affirming, and now I don't know how to do that.
Wow. So, can you paint a picture of a man who has been successful, right, in dealing with whatever, depression,
Yeah.
anxiety, whatever it is?
So to me, almost all problems people come in with come down to a lack of healthy, intimate community in their lives, and that's especially true for men. So very few men who come in who are in need of help and counseling have a good, vibrant, connected community around them that they lean on. So I'd say number one is, I don't want you to leave counseling until you have that, because right now I'm going to be a mentor, a support, big brother, all these different roles in our time, but you need somebody that's going to be in your life to do that. You need somebody that's not going to be there an hour every 2 weeks and you have to pay to come see. So I help them build those relationships and connections where, hey, I got my band of brothers here. I got my guys I can turn to. And I would tell you, guys that hit that point, a lot of the other stuff falls away. Wow, I'm less depressed than I was. Wow, I'm less anxious. Well, it's because you're filling your time with good things and good connection. You have outlets and you have resources and you have a group of people to turn to, and you're not just sort of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and trying to survive.
Yeah, that's, to your point, that's what we think about with Dads Making a Difference. One of the reasons we did the alumni network is for that reason, just to help guys have a network, and they can begin to name who are the people in my life that are supportive, right? It's Reggie, it's James, it's others at First Things First. It's it's my counselor, it's Jeff, it's and it's other guys that are even in the program themselves, so that when you have a loss, right? You have someone there to encourage you, to just kind of remind you, and they may not have the counseling, certification or that, and offer that type of expertise, but someone who helps you feel known and feel seen, I think goes a long way to really helping someone grow.
Yeah, some of the best counselors I know don't have any certifications or letters behind their names. Guys who just love well.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So I'm gonna change it up a little bit. We like to ask every dad. You said you have, was it 4 kids,
4
right?
kids, yep.
All right, and so we're gonna hit on you as a dad for a second.
Okay.
All right. What is it that makes dads irreplaceable?
Okay, that's a good question. Wow, that's. I would say that whether it be boys or girls, there's something about a dad and that presence of someone there who is solid and stable and consistent in their life. I think people assume that from moms. Moms are going to be there. Moms are on the home front. Moms are on the front line. And I know we're in a different culture now where that's more split and there's more dual career. But I think it's still in most families, mom is kind of the point person. But just looking in my own family at my kids need my presence there, and they feel it when it's not. I was asking my son at one point, how am I doing with the work-life balance? And he said, you haven't been doing well up until recently. He kind of gave a time frame for that. And as he said it, there was sadness. And I'm like, he needed my presence. And not just present physically, but present emotionally. Because I can be home at night and just passed out on the couch because I'm exhausted, as opposed to he needs me to come up to his room and check on him. And there's something safe and comfortable and secure about having that with a dad. And I think when that's lacking, there's a void there that kids try to fill other ways.
How have you, I'm going a little sideways, how have you made sure, and you've given a little bit, to separate and, on one end, you don't come home to counsel your family.
Sure.
But on another end, you've been emotionally available to all these people all day.
Right.
And you've got to be present in that way, too.
Yeah.
How have you navigated that?
I have a 45-minute drive commute there to and from work, and people are like, oh my word, that's so far. I can't believe you got to drive 45 minutes. And my thought is, I have time on the way and the time home to sort of take a breath, think through, meditate, pray, and just rest a little bit. So when I hit the end of the day and I've seen 8 or 9 people and it's been a long day, having that 45-minute drive allows me to make that transition where by the time I'm home, I'm ready to be present. If I had a 5-minute commute, I would have to come in and say, hey, I need a few minutes just to, change my clothes, get my head together. Because I know if I walked in the door, like you said, after a day of doing that, I just wouldn't be good at being what I need to be.
Gotcha. Last thing, if you could provide your children with any experience, what would that be?
Yeah. I would provide them with the experience of having consistent one-on-one time with me as a dad, that my kids value that in our relationship probably more than anything. And that goes from everything from I do an annual boys trip with my boys where we go somewhere for a weekend. Doesn't matter where we go, we're just going. They love that. To, hey, I'm going to the grocery store. Does somebody want to come with me? Somebody always wants to come. You wouldn't even think people would be interested in the grocery store, but it's like, hey, I'm getting half an hour with Dad, just one-on-one. They crave that attention and that one-on-one to really feel connected and special, and especially with 7 kids and 4 kids, they don't get that as much as they want.
Wow. Jeff, you've been amazing. I am so glad to hear that as it is becoming more prevalent that men are dealing with more of their own mental health. I know it's a fight that all of us have in different ways, that there are men that other men can go see, can go talk to, and really feel empowered and successful in navigating that journey. So I appreciate what you do, and thank you for making a difference.
And thank you for having me, Reggie. It's been a privilege.
You've been listening to Dads Making a Difference, powered by First Things First. Join us for our next episode right here.